So let's talk about big tech because there's a lot to get into here. The Supreme Court, right now, there was just a statement by Justice Clarence Thomas on a petition that just came out a week ago. We have this here. I think we can read it. The word of what does that mean? Certificatory? Can you explain?
Certiorari.
Certiorari.
So, just so people understand the context.
Is that what Hirono was trying to say earlier?
No, she was trying to say capricious. She was also trying to say she doesn't know shit about anything.
Well, she did try. She got that across.
So contextually, if you have the highest courts in any particular states is usually Supreme Court. In New York, it's called the Court of Appeals. And from there, you go to the U.S. Supreme Court. If you're on the federal side, you go trial court, Court of Appeal, and then those are called the Circuit Courts of Appeal, and then you go to the federal court, and then you go to the Supreme Court. So the U.S. Supreme Court is the final court of destination for all. It's the court of last resort. But to get to the U.S. Supreme Court and actually get a brief on the merits or a decision or oral argument or opinion, you have to petition for a writ of certiorari. The writ of certiorari says, yes, this is a legitimate thing that we need to resolve. Because they get so many. They get thousands and thousands and thousands. So they have to do kind of summary opinions. They usually don't even say anything. Right. But here, Clarence Thomas has taken a stand to say, I agree that we should not grant this case, the Malwarebytes case, for certiorari. But let me tell you a little bit about the law that is related. And that's where he has issued an
this is about 230?
About Section
About 230, and he was talking about removing their sort of what he said was infinite immunity that they currently have, which would ultimately allow users to hold big tech responsible for bias in handling content. That's kind of what he expressed, Clarence Thomas.
That's exactly it. He has, in some folks on the left have said he's encouraging someone to bring a lawsuit to allow the Supreme Court to address this. And you know what he is? He definitely is. And folks in the big tech side are scared. So what they're trying to do is create a straw man. They're trying to say, oh, well, if you even touch one little hair on the head of Section 230, the internet will collapse and we won't be able to do anything. But what he's trying to do is exactly what he is saying can be done if you reinterpret 230 correctly, as opposed to what the other.
Well, let's give for people who don't necessarily understand. 230 relates to big tech, right? And it relates to certain protections. So 230C1 I have here. It's currently interpreted too broadly. This is from, I believe, Clarence Thomas, by courts to give blanket immunity to social media companies when it doesn't go that broad. Under 230F, ICP is anyone responsible in whole or in part for the creation or development of content, soliciting ads, providing reviews, determining what is shown and when. He says Section 230 has a limited waiver for good faith, which includes concepts of reasonable disclosure, policies, and enforcement, as well as viewpoints and bias. So explain for people what 230 means. These are sort of the safe harbor where it means effectively, and this is what we've always talked about in the show, I don't think that big tech should be put out of business and should be sued and said, you have to allow this kind of content on your platform. But they do enjoy certain protections as platforms as opposed to being publishers. In other words, right now, if New York Times writes an article, this is me giving the simp version, then you can give the legal version. If New York Times writes an article, for example, that says, it's a Russian disinformation campaign, Giuliani is a spy for the Russians, and Hunter Biden is a saint, which isn't that far off from actual headlines of the New York Times. Someone can say, maybe Giuliani can say, well, now that it's been confirmed it was dropped off at a Geek Squad while he was on a crack bender, that's a lie, that's slander, that's libel, and they can sue the New York Times because they are a publisher. If someone posts in a comment section or uploads a video to YouTube saying this much, you cannot sue YouTube for a third party uploading that content if they are a neutral third party platform and they enjoy tax benefits and exemptions being a platform.
And that's exactly what it is. So there's two different parts of 230. The first one says, if you are a social media company or a website that posts other people's content, so other people who are creating content like comments or videos or whatever it may be, you cannot be held liable as the publisher of that content just because you hosted it. And that makes sense. We couldn't have the internet without, much of the internet without having the ability for people to be able to do their own posts. And there's so much content, it's hard to really manage all of it. But that's what the second part is for. It says that there is a good faith, and the word good faith is in there. Good faith exception to liability for removing content that is harassing, violent, or otherwise objectionable. And that's really what it comes down to. You've always said, you run a business. You want to run the business however you want, run it however you want. You just have to do it in a way that's not fraudulent.
Right.
And fraudulent is the other side of good faith. Right. If you're saying you're an open platform, you're not going to discriminate based on political viewpoint or race or religion, okay, then enforce your guidelines accordingly. And Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all of them have policies that are neutral, but they don't actually
to explain it to people, because there's a difference, right? There's a difference in any business that you run. For example, how you handle your taxes, whether there are write-offs, okay? Let's say that you're a surgeon. okay, and your taxes come up and you spend, I don't know what surgeon, but let's say you're like Ben Carson, so he probably has like gold scalpels, okay? So you spend $150,000 on surgical equipment, right? And then your tax returns come in and you go, okay, I'm going to write this off. And I say, okay, well, that's because it's used for your job. And then you say, yeah, but I didn't use that for surgery. I just used it on the side. Well, then that's not a write-off. You don't enjoy some kind of exemption for that.
Yeah.
It's not something used for your work. This is why we have nonprofits. They don't pay a tax exempt. They have a tax exempt status. 501c3s, not 501c4s. The difference there is because a C4 can be a political organization.
Yeah.
You can raise money for politics, but because you're engaging in the political process, you are not tax exempt. If you are a charity raising money, let's say for breast cancer, that's something where you have a tax exemption. You don't have to pay the same kind of taxes as a profitable business would. This is important for people to understand, because the tax status as it exists for social media companies and what is permissible, it is predicated on the idea that they are an open platform and not a publisher, but they are increasingly acting like a publisher. They're acting anyone want to act as though that Twitter is not acting more like the New York Times than they were acting like the early MySpace?
Yeah.
Of course they are. They just banned a story about the current presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. Think about that for a second. You want to bitch about money in politics and Russian interference for $10,000 for 3,000 ads? How much money if you were to put a dollar amount on the banning, on the throttling of the biggest story of the week that directly involves the current presidential nominee for the Democratic Party in a corruption ring, and no one is able to read it, how much money's worth in advertising is that? I tell you what, if I could, for some reason, if Twitter put Louder with Crowder at the top of their trends, or YouTube decided to put it, if they said, hey, we're going to put your channel on the homepage for 5 days, and we're going to block CNN and Seth Meyers and Young Turks, we're going to give you a leg up, I would personally pay millions for that. Millions. And that's the kind of free advertising that you get exclusively to the left.
Yeah, so Bill, I have a question for you. Is that good faith exception in there now, or is that something that Clarence Thomas was saying should be in there?
No, it's in there. It's
okay,
section 230C2A. That section says, and what Clarence Thomas is saying in the statement is, in order to have any exception, you have to first realize that there isn't just blanket immunity, and that's how the courts have interpreted C1. They have said, oh, no, you just, anything that is put on your content, anything that's done is just blanket. And the only way you can, it doesn't make any sense to have that limited, narrow protection in C2A, which is the good faith section.
Yeah.
And that the only way to harmonize those is to read those the way that Clarence Thomas has. And it's the first word that we've ever heard out of the Supreme Court on this particular topic. So that's the first way is the removing of materials. But now you see in even, I would say, a legal blunder on behalf of Facebook, where they are actually going out and going to a bunch of different organizations and pages and labeling stuff as fake news. And a lot of people have seen this now. It says partially fake or fake news, and that is outside of the 230 protection.
Right.
Because now people can go after them for the content that they've actually created themselves.
Well, we were fake news when we said that masks, early on, when Fauci was saying, don't wear masks, we said, well, listen, masks won't help you from breathing it in, but if you think you may be sick, it would be a good idea for you to wear a mask. We were fake news.
Yeah.
You were fake news about we should wear masks, yes. Yeah. We already have a system in place that deals with defamation. We have both the civil and criminal statutes that deal with, for example, child porn and what the obligations are to remove dangerous or illegal material. But what these platforms have done is decided they are not going to just do the base level dangerous or illegal type materials, but they're going to go even further. They are going to decide to carry water for certain political groups or parties or movements or viewpoints and imply that against everyone, even despite denying the fact that they're doing it. While they're doing it, they're saying, no, we're not doing it. We have just decided, we picked one source. Okay, who is that source? That source is clearly politically biased. It doesn't matter. We're not politically biased, but you are based on the source that you give. So that's what we're seeing right now. And
they screwed the pooch. Twitter screwed the pooch by banning the White House press secretary and throttling the president and his son and all that with information that actually was accurate. And I hope that it opens them up to libel. Is libel the written one or slander's written?
So libel is the oral. Sorry, libel is written, slander is the oral.
So it would open them to libel if they were saying completely unverified, false allegations against Hunter Biden for Kayleigh McEnany, for Donald Trump Jr. If everything that we know right now turns out to be true, that puts them in hot water. Since you had a question, and then I had a question for you, and then we'll go to the
and the New York Post, just by the way, they still don't have access to their Twitter account.
Yeah.
They're still locked out of their Twitter account today.
couple of questions here, because now there's the antitrust suit
Right.
that will be going
Huge.
through, which is this idea of Google being a monopoly that needs to be broken up. Of course, they also own, Alphabet, they own YouTube and Google. And my question is, can both of these be relevant in one case, that they're a monopoly, and because they're a monopoly, it's far more corrosive to the American sort of information highway, for lack of a better word, when they are editing their monopoly in a biased way?
So there's a way in which the violation of the good faith exception does actually play into the antitrust. So, for example, think about if you had a large media company like NBC Universal, and they own Vox, and those are both media companies, and they get together
Hypothetically.
Just a hypothetical.
Let's say they get with another media company, YouTube. And
Hypothetically, yeah.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, I mean,
and then, purportedly, allegedly, hypothetically, those get together and they go, oh, you know who we really don't like is this conservative YouTuber.
Right.
And what we'd like you to do is, well, if you can't take him off, we'd like you to just go back and retroactively decide that he's committed enough violations that you should remove his ability to make money on the platform, hypothetically, allegedly, purportedly.
Right.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That is antitrust. That is the core of competitors getting together to box out using illicit activity, anti-competitive activity, fraudulent activity in order to prevent another competitor
And if, let's
from
say,
existing in the
hypothetically, they also asked you to go back and remove prior videos that were not a violation at the time, but now are a violation, and hypothetically, purportedly, allegedly, all of those videos included criticisms of the aforementioned news entity like NBC Vox. If hypothetically that were to happen, and hypothetically a company like YouTube were to say, well, listen, these should probably be removed, that seems like that might be relevant.
It might be. It might be, exactly. And so
Hypothetically.
the current suit...
Especially if hypothetically this company, allegedly, purportedly NBC Universal, right? Especially if they were creating a show in co-production with hypothetically the company YouTube,
Right.
Yeah.
To distribute, to which my programming would be competitive, hypothetically.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a terrible world to live in,
Right.
hypothetically.
That would be.
So the current DOJ suit is not focused on that aspect, though I know that part is still being under investigation. It's being investigated by the DOJ, but the part that they've already released and the part they've already dropped is the idea that in the ad and search space, Google has used its anti-competitive measures in order to block out competition and force its products on a number of folks. Again, you're allowed to do that within certain realms in business, but you're not allowed to do it in a manner that violates antitrust laws, which is being anti-competitive. The classic example, the Rockefeller, you go in, you buy up 3 of the corners, the 4th corner you don't own as a gas station, you drop all of your prices, drop in a collusive way because you own them all, and then you drive that 4th corner out of business, and then you buy it and you jack up all the prices. So that's one of the hypothetical. There's a couple other ones, but let me put it this way. People on the left or the right, if you're listening to this and you're going, well, this is just about anti-conservative bias, even the Democrats have realized. Joe Biden, January 2020, said we need to curb the 230 liability. And it's one of the few sane, rational things he said in a moment of lucid thought.
Well, he
Here's a
denies
question.
it now, though.
Yeah, he denies it. He denies what he had for breakfast.
He doesn't know.
Frosted Flakes. I'm a Honey Nut Cheerios. Man, sir, you're allergic to oats. It's corn for me. What? So, it's like like powerlifters, they have those ammonia smelling salts, like that. But it's just essence of child.
Right before goes on stage.
And he gets in his squat suit. Here's my question for you, because YouTube, for example, it's no secret this is something that is not allegedly purportedly. YouTube obviously had a problem with us. That, for example, the transgender individual, where we laughed at this person who assaulted me, that was considered a violation. And YouTube has made it very clear that even speaking out against children transitioning is a problem, could be a violation of their speech code. So my question to you is, because we have Joe Biden saying, I'm going to change the law to make it so that 8-year-old kids can transition, right? He just said that in the recent town hall. Well, we know that there are age of consent laws, and it's not 8 years old. So if that kind of a case, which is very likely, makes it up to the Supreme Court, let's say a case where a father says, like the case in Texas, my wife thinks that my 7-year-old son has the ability to consent to be a girl, and she's putting him on hormone blockers and puberty stunters, and I think it's dangerous. And it goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, actually, just like 8-year-olds don't have the right to consent sexually, they do not have the right to consent to surgery or procedures that could permanently alter their sexuality. Let's say that were to happen as a ruling, which is not outside of the possibility.
Right.
Does that create a real problem for a company like YouTube that says even criticizing the idea of 6-year-olds transitioning is hate speech?
Absolutely. So, first of all, there's no question at all that the court would find that 8-year-olds don't have the right to consent. And really, that main issue there would be, do the parents have the right to leverage the child's statements or feelings in order to force them into a transition against the will of the other parent in a type of danger? But the concept of media and being able to talk about the procedures really does put YouTube and the other platforms in a bind, because we have to be able to talk about it. And the more mainstream the criticism becomes of these types of policies, whether through a lawsuit that gets to the Supreme Court, or God forbid if Biden wins and this type of law makes it to the House or the Senate or even to the president's desk, all of that is going to be stuff where we have to be allowed to talk about it.
But I'm saying that's the concern, is it's so radical left. This idea that YouTube, you can be removed, you can be permanently harmed or get a hard strike simply for saying, I don't think that 8-year-olds should be allowed to transition. So I'm saying it's so radical that if it makes it to the court where they uphold this idea of actually age of consent applies to puberty blockers as well, well, then YouTube's in the hot seat because they're saying that hate speech is the law. On the flip side, they can ban anyone. It makes it easier to ban anyone who speaks out against 8-year-olds using puberty blockers, parents administering them. If you have a Joe Biden presidency that says, yep, age of consent is now 7. Now they have free reign. That's what's so terrifying to me.
Right.
And what's at stake with this election. People are saying, what disturbs you the most? Listen, it's not Joe Biden. It is what can happen with information, big tech, and becoming like a Chinese model of media.
Watch Good Morning Mug Club live every Monday through Thursday at 10:15 Eastern.